Bhagavad Gita verse 1, chapter 3. If knowledge is superior to action in your opinion, O Janardana, why do you want me to perform this horrible action, O Keshava? We begin the third chapter with a question from Arjuna. It is wonderful to see the give and take between a student and a disciple come up several times in the Gita, making it more accessible and human. Let us dig deeper into Arjuna's question. In the last chapter, Shri Krishna introduced the topic of karmayoga, where one performs selfless action. But later, he spoke about the knowledge of the eternal essence. Arjuna interpreted this as a statement that knowledge is superior to wisdom and wanted to clarify whether it was so. As an analogy, I remember the experience of learning music. In most cases, new students of music gave more importance to performing a popular song on stage than to endure the rigor and discipline of daily finger drills that could get repetitive and boring. Similarly, Arjuna thought that knowledge was superior in action. Arjuna also referred to his fighting in the war as a horrible action. This word speaks a lot about his mental state. Shri Krishna had taught him that one should maintain equanimity in pleasant and unpleasant situations. But Arjuna had not internalized and assimilated the teaching. This is not uncommon. Our experience will usually indicate that a one-time hearing or shravana of any teaching will not be enough. We also need to reflect on the teaching, which is also known as manana. And finally, we have to internalize it so that it becomes part of our personality nididhyasana. In the next shloka, Arjuna completes his question to Shri Krishna. Bhagavad Gita verse 2, chapter 3. You are confusing my intellect with these mixed up statements. Therefore, be certain and tell me that one statement by which I will attain the highest good. Arjuna concludes his question to Shri Krishna in this shloka. As we saw last time, Arjuna did not fully comprehend the teaching from the second chapter. Being a military man, one who is trained in issuing and receiving terse orders in battlefield, he needed clear and simple instructions. Shri Krishna has covered the entire essence of the Gita in the second chapter. So therefore, Arjuna asked Shri Krishna to reveal what was most appropriate for him at this point in time. Let us refer to the student of music from the prior example. A student who starts his formal training in classical music usually attends a Classical Music 101 course which covers topics such as the types of classical music, renowned composers and their compositions, the evolution of music through several centuries and so on. But the teaching that is most beneficial to the beginner student is simple concepts like how to locate a note on the piano and so on. The second chapter of the Gita is just like the Classical Music 101 course that covers lot of topics and techniques. With his mind bewildered by all that was heard, Arjuna asked Shri Krishna to provide the one technique that was most appropriate for Arjuna at this stage in his spiritual journey. Shri Krishna understood Arjuna's situation and provided an answer in the next shloka. Bhagavad Gita verse 3, chapter 3. Shri Bhagwan said, In this world, since time immemorial, I have created a twofold path, O sinless one, the yoga of knowledge for contemplative individuals, and the yoga of action for yogis. Earlier, we saw that Arjuna wanted to know which of the two paths, i.e. the yoga of action and the yoga of knowledge, is superior. Shri Krishna addresses that question here. According to him, none of the two is either superior or inferior. Sant Gyaneshwar provides an example to show that none of these paths are superior or inferior, like a west-flowing river and an east-flowing river that both meet the same ocean, both paths are same. Now, even though the paths are complementary, there is a subtle difference between them. Let us explore this difference. Consider a child who is in the first grade. Even if he wants to, he cannot jump straight to a master's degree. He would have to finish high school, then college, and only then will he be ready for his master's degree. In the same way, most of us are at a stage in life where we are active and want to make a contribution to the world. For such yogis or active individuals, the path of action is the most appropriate. Once we reach a stage where we exhaust all of our desires, we can transcend the path of action to pursue the path of knowledge, just like we transcend college education to pursue our master's degree. I used to know a classmate from school that was a math prodigy. He could solve advanced calculus equations in 6th grade. The teachers used to check with him whether they were teaching 6th grade math correctly, such was his prowess. He did not need to go through elementary math. He was ready for his math PhD even at that young age. Similarly, there are a few rare individuals who are at an advanced stage of their spiritual journey. They have eliminated most of their desires. Only such rare contemplative individuals can directly pursue the path of knowledge. For most of us, the path of action is the way to go. And karmayoga, or the path of action, is the main subject covered in this chapter. On a different note, we see that Shri Krishna is hinting that he is something more than the cowherd son of Vasudeva here. We know this because he mentions that he himself has created this twofold path for realizing the eternal essence. This has not slipped past Arjuna. He will ask this question at the right time. Bhagavad Gita verse 4, chapter 3. Neither does an individual attain actionlessness by not initiating action, nor by mere renunciation does he attain perfection. In the prior shloka, Shri Krishna dispelled Arjuna's notion that the yoga of knowledge was superior to the yoga of wisdom. But there was another aspect to Arjuna's question. He still was not convinced that he should fight the war, and was searching for pointers in Shri Krishna's teaching that supported his desire to give up all action and flee the war. We saw this in the first chapter where he went to the extent of suggesting that he become a monk. Shri Krishna wanted to address that issue in this shloka. First, let us understand what is meant by the word actionlessness in this shloka. Like many words in scriptures, it is not meant to be taken literally. The word actionlessness points to the ultimate state of the sthita prajna from the previous chapter. In this state, the vaasanaas have been so thoroughly eliminated that all action becomes completely selfless. There is absolutely no trace of selfishness. The word siddhim or the state of perfection in the second half of the shloka also refers to this state. So therefore, Shri Krishna warned Arjuna that actionlessness cannot be attained by not starting a new action, nor by giving up actions that have already started. It would be similar to cutting off a plant without plucking its roots. Until our vaasanaas have been completely eradicated, they will keep generating desires which will lead us to selfish actions. But once vaasanaas have been eradicated, only selfless actions will remain. Now, some of us who are not fully convinced by this argument could still say, I will renounce all actions right now and move to a quiet solitary place. If I just sit still for a long time, my desires will automatically melt away. Shri Krishna addresses this point in the next shloka. Bhagavad Gita verse 5, chapter 3. For no one can stay without performing action, even for a moment. All beings, helplessly, are compelled to act by the gunas born of Prakriti. Imagine a huge forest untouched by man, like we see on the National Geographic Channel. If we look at it superficially, we could conclude that there is nothing going on there. But if we pay close attention, we will begin to hear the chirping of the crickets, the babble of a brook, the fluttering of wings and so on. Watching all the actions going on in the forest reminds us of a simple fact. It is the tendency of nature or Prakriti to act continuously. It never stays actionless even for a moment. Even a rock that seems actionless is undergoing geological change that is visible only after thousands or millions of years. Now let's shift our attention to the human body. It too is constructed by nature. It is composed of substances derived from the food we eat, the water we drink and the air we breathe, all products of nature. If our body is made of components born out of nature, wouldn't it also follow the tendency of nature towards continuous action? Therefore, Shri Krishna informs us that all beings have no choice but to act, because all beings are made up of Prakriti. He explains that Prakriti is nothing but three gunas, energies or forces that make up this entire universe. These three energies are Rajas, which causes movement, Tamas, which causes inertia, and Sattva, which maintains harmony between movement and inertia. This topic is taken up in great detail in later chapters. In this way, Shri Krishna addresses the question raised earlier, why can't I retire to the forest and cease all action? We cannot, because the gunas that we are made up are born out of nature, and nature never ceases to act continuously. If this answer still does not satisfy us, let us try to sit still for 3 hours. Even if we somehow manage to physically sit still, our minds will be racing with thoughts. And even the act of thinking is an action. Bhagavad Gita verse 6, chapter 3. One who sits, forcibly restraining his organs of action, yet keeps thinking about objects, that foolish individual is known as a hypocrite. The second chapter of the Gita informed us that the way to achieve the ultimate spiritual goal is by eliminating our vaasanaas, because they are the source of selfish desires. But this message has the potential to be dangerous if it is misinterpreted. Under the banner of becoming more spiritual, some people put their bodies through extreme fasting, while some forcibly repress their urges. We see a milder version of this behavior when individuals are trying to rid themselves of addictions by simply cutting off the supply or going cold turkey. For example, if one has an addiction to alcohol, one tries not to keep alcohol in the house to avoid temptation. That may work in the short term, but an addiction is not in the body, it is in the mind. It is like any other vasana, and will come up as a desire when one sees alcohol the next time. So in this shloka, Shri Krishna issues a strong warning to anyone who thinks that they can advance on the spiritual path through extreme repression of the body or of the mind. He uses a strong term to admonish such individuals by calling them hypocrites. Let us connect this shloka to the previous one. It informed us that the body, mind and intellect comprise the three gunas. These gunas born of Prakriti will always compel us to perform actions. But the current shloka tells us that repression of action will not lead to elimination of desires. We have no choice but to perform action, yet we need clear up our desires and vasanas. So what is the conclusion? We have to find a way to eliminate vasanas while we are performing actions. That technique is karmayoga. Bhagavad Gita verse 7, chapter 3. But one who controls his senses by his mind, O Arjuna, and performs karmayoga with his organs of action without attachment, that individual is superior. In the previous shloka, we saw that repressing our urges and giving up actions does not work. A different approach is needed to clean our vasanas and selfish desires. In this shloka, Shri Krishna says that we should not give up actions, instead, we should give up attachment. Giving up attachment is a technique unto itself, and this chapter goes into a lot of detail on that topic. To begin with, this shloka informs us that we need to arm ourselves with two weapons, discrimination or viveka, and dispassion or vairagya. Let's first look at discrimination. If we have followed the teaching so far, we know that material objects are temporary and are not the true sources of happiness. But it is extremely easy to forget this teaching, especially if we have strong vaasanaas and desires. Therefore, we have to constantly arm ourselves with the weapon of discrimination by being always aware and alert about our thoughts and emotions. And we have to be especially alert when we are around objects that we are attached to. For a simple example, take food. It could be chocolate for the sweet tooth person, fried food for the obese person, etc. Next comes dispassion. If we constantly practice discrimination, dispassion will happen automatically. Objects, people and situations will begin to lose their hold on us. Dispassion will prevent our energy from rushing out into the world of material objects through our senses. This is what the shloka means by the phrase one who controls his senses by his mind. Finally, once the mind has gained back control over the senses, then the energy that once rushed out through our senses can be channeled into performing karmayoga. The next shloka will go deeper into what Shri Krishna means by karmayoga. Bhagavad Gita verse 8, chapter 3. You should perform prescribed actions, since action is superior to inaction. Also, even the journey of the body cannot be accomplished through inaction. Having covered the topic of why one should perform action, Shri Krishna now speaks about what kind of action should be performed. He urges Arjuna to only perform niyatam or prescribed actions. What does this term mean? Scriptures classify actions into several categories. Let us look at the two main ones, niyatam or prescribed actions, and nishiddha or forbidden actions. Prescribed actions are those that are enjoined in the Vedas. But in today's context, we can interpret this as one's duties. These include performing one's swadharma, serving one's parents, family, and nation, etc. Forbidden actions are the thou shalt not actions, such as killing another being, stealing, cheating, and so on. So here, Shri Krishna urges Arjuna to perform prescribed actions, but without any trace of attachment to the action or to the fruit. Now one may say, I like to watch a movie and enjoy a good meal. Those do not seem like prescribed duties. How should we think about those? Shri Krishna does not advocate repressing anything, as we saw earlier. But we should to define boundaries to any action, as well as minimize attachment or selfish motive. The best way to do so is to share. If you want to watch TV, watch it collectively with your family and friends. Or share your meal with them. Doing so will ensure that our previously self-serving actions lose any trace of selfishness or ego. The best example here is a mom that always cooks what the family members like and puts her preferences on a lower priority. In addition, Shri Krishna reiterates the notion that one should never resort to inaction. He says that if one does not act, one cannot even perform maintenance of one's body. Our body is an important tool in our spiritual journey. Nowhere in the Gita has Shri Krishna asked us to neglect it. In fact, here he is saying that one should absolutely perform action to maintain the body, including bathing it, feeding it, keeping it strong and fit, and going to the doctor if it is not working properly. It is an extremely practical teaching. Bhagavad Gita verse 9, chapter 3. Other than those actions performed for yajna, this world gets bound by action. Therefore, O Kaunteya, perform actions in that regard, without attachment. So far, Shri Krishna spoke about why performing action is essential, as well as what kind of action to perform. With this shloka, he begins the main topic of this chapter, which deals with how to perform actions. The second chapter mentioned it briefly, but this chapter goes deeper into it. Shri Krishna uses the beautiful metaphor of a yajna to convey this teaching. In Indian culture, a yajna is a formal ritual of worship. Firstly, we fix a higher ideal before commencing a yajna and dedicate the entire yajna to that ideal. Typically, that ideal is a devta or a deity. Secondly, we perform actions such as chanting mantras and pouring oblations into the sacrificial fire, but do so with absolutely no trace of selfishness. Some mantras even include the words na mama or not me to make unselfishness explicit. So how does that ancient ritual apply to us? Let us look at a practical example. An accountant working for a corporation can be successful if she acts in the spirit of a yajna. She should set a higher ideal, e.g. I dedicate myself to the success of this corporation. Then, she should perform her job responsibilities in the service of that goal. She will, for instance, frequently sign large checks where there are opportunities to play games for selfish profit. But she will not even think about such things because her focus is on the company's well-being, not hers. Now let us see what happens when her goal becomes selfish. She will begin to do things that generate conflict of interest in corporate speak. She may slowly divert some of the company money to a shell company owned by a friend and so on. From a worldly perspective, she will get kicked out of the company sooner or later. From a spiritual perspective, each selfish action will bind her, propelling her into further selfish desires and away from self-realization. Bhagavad Gita verse 10, chapter 3. In ancient times, Prajapati created humanity along with yajna. He said through this, yajna, let everyone prosper, and may it become your fulfiller of wishes. A common question for many of us is, I understand the concept of selfless dedication. However, how do I know that I will be able to fulfill my material needs if I give up caring for the fruits of action altogether? Shri Krishna has the answer, perform actions with selfless dedication or yajna, and your material needs will be provided for automatically. If we work for a corporation, we do several different things every day to fulfill our job responsibilities, respond to emails, attend meetings, draft project plans, make Excel documents and so on. Do we ever think, how much money will I get paid for opening this email? How much money do I get for attending this meeting? If we have done our job right, the results will automatically come to us in the form of a monthly salary. Shri Krishna explains that yajna is embedded within the fabric of humanity since time immemorial. It is a universal law. Once invoked, that law provides us with all that we need in this world. It becomes the fulfiller of wishes. And the key to invoke that universal law is to perform selfless action dedicated to a higher ideal. This is the essence of karmayoga. Bhagavad Gita verse 11, chapter 2. You will make the deities prosper through this, yajna, and the deities will make you prosper. By mutually making each other prosperous, you will attain the highest good. In this shloka, Shri Krishna emphasizes that the definition yajna includes all beings, not just the one individual who is following this technique. Modern management practices agree that when two parties negotiate, the best outcome is one where both parties benefit, rather than one gaining and one losing. This outcome is known as a win-win situation. Shri Krishna reinforces this very same principle. He urges us to act in a spirit of harmony and cooperation with others whenever we undertake any action. An interesting word is used here, devta or deity. What does it represent? It represents each and every factor that is responsible for our action. In a narrow sense, it represents other individuals who collectively represent the higher ideal that we are working for, e.g. members in our family, colleagues in our company, citizens in our nation and so on. But in a broad sense, it includes all humans, animals, plants and all of nature that we share this earth with. It is a recognition that there is a higher ideal operating at all times when we perform even a trivial action like eating our lunch. Shri Krishna urges us to not forget this point. In essence, if we serve a higher ideal, that higher ideal will serve us. This is the message. Conversely, Shri Krishna reminds us to not treat any individual, plant or animal with disrespect, since they are collectively serving us in some way or another. Bhagavad Gita verse 12, chapter 2. The deities, nourished by yajna, will also provide you the objects you desire. One who consumes these objects without offering them to others, he is a thief. So far, Shri Krishna spoke about the need for karmayoga, the actions to perform under karmayoga, and the attitude with which those actions should be performed. He also emphasized the notion of yajna or selfless dedication. Now Shri Krishna gives 3 levels of action that a person can operate under. In this shloka, Shri Krishna points out the lowest level of action. This is when an individual consumes objects without making any contribution whatsoever. Shri Krishna uses a strong word to describe such an individual, a thief. Such a selfish person does not care about anyone but himself due to his large ego. An obvious example is someone who is part of a project team. He does not do any work in team but claims all the credit. In today's language, we would call such a person a freeloader. Such people are never held in good standing by anyone. In traditions all over the world, we see evidence that we are encouraged to give back something each time we take something. In Indian culture, it is customary that before one eats a meal, one offers it to the less fortunate, the wise and learned, and to animals. In most cultures, when you cut down a tree, you are encouraged to plant few more. Even in the corporate world, when a company earns profits, it invests a portion back into the business before handing out the dividends. Therefore, taking without giving back is the lowest level of action. The next shloka illustrates the 2 higher levels of action. We need to gauge which level we belong to, so that we can start moving to the highest level of selflessness. Bhagavad Gita verse 13, chapter 3. Those wise individuals who consume the remains of yajna, they are liberated from all sins. But those sinful ones who cook only for themselves, they consume only sin. In the previous shloka, Shri Krishna began the topic of the 3 levels of action. We saw that in the first level, the individual does not perform any action and only consumes. In this shloka, Shri Krishna explains the second and third levels of action. Selfish action is the second level of action. In this level, the individual only thinks about himself. His vision is very narrow and limited. When this individual works in a team, his only thought is, how much of the result can be kept for myself? He also treats everyone he works with as his competitors. For him to win, they have to lose. Shri Krishna says that such individuals cook only for themselves and consume only sin. The third level and highest level of action is that of selfless action. The individual who works selflessly seldom thinks about himself. His vision is broad. He is always thinking about how to act such that his family will benefit, his employer will benefit, his nation will benefit, and so on. He always treats others with respect and as partners in collectively achieving the highest possible goal. Shri Krishna says that by working in this highest level of action, such wise individuals are liberated from all sins. Another mark of this individual that he treats everything that he possesses as materials to be used in a yajna, which means that he does not consider anything as mine. Everything belongs to the higher ideal, family, company, nation, etc. So therefore, he is more than happy to partake in what is left after everyone else has consumed their share of the fruits of the yajna. Our natural tendency is to make a grab for our share and then let others worry about theirs. But this individual, keeping sight of the higher ideal at all times, ensures that others are taken care of before taking care of himself. So what does this mean for us? When we perform any action every day, let us make an attempt to gauge the level of the action being performed by us. Is it selfish, selfless, or are we so lazy that we are not acting at all? Bhagavad Gita verse 14, chapter 3. From food are all beings created, from rain, food is created. Yajna gives birth to rain, and rain is born out of action. Shri Krishna illustrates how yajna is embedded within the fabric of the entire universe. If we interpret this shloka literally, it refers to Vedic rituals that were used to invoke the rain gods. But if we want to go deeper, we have to interpret this shloka symbolically. We have seen that action is an integral tendency of any object in the universe. Even a tiny atom is always acting. So when any group of organisms, plants, animals, humans collectively work for the sake of a higher ideal, that is called yajna. The output of this yajna is an environment that is charged with the potential to create almost anything. This environment is symbolically called rain in this shloka. Finally, this rain or productive potential creates all kinds of objects that are useful to organisms. The shloka refers to these objects as food. For instance, take a largely unknown area in Northern California during World War II. Many scientists, lawyers, professors, business people came to this area with a higher ideal to further the frontier of technology. Through their collective efforts, they created an environment which became conducive to technological innovation, which we now know as Silicon Valley. And Silicon Valley, even to this day, produces cutting-edge products that benefit people around the world. There are several such examples of environments born out of yajna: India's freedom struggle, the economic success of Singapore, the entertainment industry in Bombay, and so on. So the message here is that if people come together to work towards a higher ideal, it is a guarantee that their efforts will be successful. Bhagavad Gita verse 15, chapter 3. Know that actions arise out of the Vedas, and that the Vedas arise out of the imperishable, eternal essence. Therefore, yajna is always established in that all-pervading eternal essence. Shri Krishna reveals the connection between yajna and the eternal essence in this shloka. Here he says that yajna is an integral part of the eternal essence because it is born out of the Vedas. Symbolically, the Vedas represent the rulebook of the universe, and so yajna becomes an essential law embedded in the universe. In the second chapter, which was an overview of the entire Gita, Shri Krishna pointed Arjuna to the ultimate goal of life: realization of the eternal essence. In this chapter, Shri Krishna connects karmayoga to the eternal essence. He explains that karmayoga is a means, a technique, to realize the eternal essence, because the eternal essence created the rules of the universe. So in summary, the teaching of karmayoga so far is actions are of two types, selfless and selfish. Selfish actions bind us to worldly objects, and selfless actions do not. Therefore, Shri Krishna urges us to move gradually from the level of inaction to selfish action first, and then from selfish action to selfless action or yajna. Only through acting in the spirit of yajna will we move forward on the path to realizing the eternal essence. Bhagavad Gita verse 16, chapter 3. In this manner, one who does not follow this system of evolution, that malicious individual who dwells in sense pleasures, wastes his life. In the two preceding shlokas, Shri Krishna illustrated how several beings acting in the spirit of yajna brought forth the potential for serving each other. Now he takes the illustration one step further. He says that yajna is a system of evolution, which means it is a method to move from a lower plane of existence to a higher plane of existence. Darwin's theory of evolution describes how life evolved from simple single-celled organisms into plants, then into animals, then into primates, and culminated in our species, the humans. What comes next? Shri Krishna explains that humans, being the only species capable of rational analysis and thinking, have a choice to remain at the current state and give in to their lower nature, or evolve into a higher state of existence. What is the lower nature? When one continually harbors selfish desires and lives for the sake of sense pleasure, that person generates guilt, fear, anger, hatred, pride, and other such emotions that strengthen the ego. Such an individual is termed malicious by Shri Krishna. That individual is said to have lived in vain, because he did not use the wonderful opportunity of being born as a human to access the higher nature. And so, who is the individual of higher nature? It is the individual who has begun identifying with a higher ideal, and in doing so, has slowly eroded his ego in the selfless service of that higher ideal. A detailed description of such an individual was provided by Shri Krishna in the latter part of the second chapter in the Sthita Prajnalakshana, or the signs of a wise individual. Karmayoga is the first step to participate in this system of evolution. Bhagavad Gita verse 17, chapter 3. But one who revels only in the eternal essence, and is content and satisfied in the eternal essence, no duty exists for him. While hearing Shri Krishna extol the need to act in this world, many of us, whether we admit it or not, may want to know whether there is an exception to this instruction. In other words, are there any circumstances where do not need to perform actions anymore? Shri Krishna gives the answer in this shloka and the next. If we examine ourselves, we realize that we derive pleasure and satisfaction from external sources, material objects, people, relationships, and so on. Pleasant memories, which can be considered internal to us, do give us joy but were generated from some external source in the past. But, in reality, the source of happiness is the absence of desires experienced when we finally attain a material object. For instance, if we want to buy a new shirt, a desire is created in the mind. Till such time that we get the shirt, we will be unhappy because of that desire. But once the desire is fulfilled, we experience happiness for a brief period of time. Is that happiness caused by the shirt, or by the temporary absence of desires? The wise person knows that it is the latter. So in this shloka Shri Krishna makes a bold statement. He says that till we derive pleasure and satisfaction from things external to us, we have to act in this world. Conversely, one who no longer derives pleasure and satisfaction from external sources does not need to act in this world. He revels in the eternal essence which he has learned to recognize within himself. He no longer has to look outside for happiness. Is there a contradiction here? Earlier it was mentioned that if one is human, one has to act. But here, it is mentioned that the realized individual does not need to act. The answer is that once that individual has understood the true source of happiness, he loses the sense of doership. In other words, the notion that I am doing this action goes away, and all his actions become natural and spontaneous. As an example, if you truly love painting, and have mastered all the skills, then your painting becomes effortless and spontaneous. You experience a feeling that some people call being in the zone. In fact, there may come a stage where you will feel that the hand is moving by itself, and the painting is happening on its own. Similarly, all the actions of this wise individual become like that spontaneous painting. Bhagavad Gita verse 18, chapter 3. For that realized individual, there is nothing to be gained by action or inaction here. Also, he does not have even the slightest dependency on anyone for any object. In the last shloka, Shri Krishna explained that one who has found delight solely in the eternal essence loses all sense of doership. In other words, all his actions become selfless and spontaneous, like an artist who cares only about creating paintings without any expectation, art for artist's sake. Shri Krishna further elaborates that point in this shloka. He says that for such a person, the concept of gain or loss does not exist, nor does the notion of dependency or support from anyone or anything. To better understand this shloka, let us imagine a situation where one is at the end of a critical chapter in one's life, e.g. imagine that a person has submitted his resignation and is in the last week of his job. What will be his mindset? He will suddenly become the nicest guy in the office and the most fun guy to hang out with. Why is that? Everyone knows that he has no agenda with anyone anymore, since it does not really matter. And he can surf the web all day long, because it does not really matter whether he works or doesn't work. Another example could be a person who at age 65 has just retired. He has made a decent fortune with his savings, and can live comfortably till his last day. In addition, he is quite healthy, and can still work if needed. But just like in the earlier example, it does not matter whether he performs any action or doesn't. Moreover, since he does not have any dependency on anyone, his savings make him self-sufficient. Therefore, for the individual that has realized the worth of the eternal essence treasure, any other material gain or loss does not hold any meaning. Ultimately, these two shlokas reveal the state of a realized person, who by losing all sense of doership, renounces all action. Renouncing doership is renouncing action. The topic of renunciation is covered in detail in the forthcoming chapters. Bhagavad Gita verse 19, chapter 3. Therefore, always perform prescribed actions diligently without attachment, for, by performing action without attachment, an individual attains the supreme. In this shloka, Shri Krishna concludes his answer to Arjuna's question from the first verse in this chapter. Arjuna had asked Shri Krishna as to why he should commit the act of war, which in his opinion was a ghastly act. Let us recap Shri Krishna's answer. Shri Krishna replied by explaining that no one can flee from action, that one should perform selfless rather than selfish actions, that selfless actions in the service of a higher ideal do not create bondage, and that performance of selfless action or yajna is the key to participating in the evolution of oneself and of the universe. Another point emphasized in this shloka is that karmayoga should not be something that is restricted to only a few aspects of life. The karmayoga mindset should eventually become second nature. In other words, it should be embedded in each and every action that we perform. So therefore, in each and every action that we perform, from writing an email to eating our meals, we should remember to derive joy from the action itself rather than in the result. Only then will we begin to drop attachment to the action and to the result. Bhagavad Gita verse 20, chapter 3. Only through action did many like King Janaka attain perfection. So, even from the viewpoint of societal welfare should you perform action. Having provided the rationale for karmayoga, Shri Krishna began to provide examples of individuals who gained liberation through karmayoga. He wanted to demonstrate that it indeed was the right path to follow. Providing an example would also eliminate any doubt in Arjuna's mind that karmayoga was a proven methodology, not a new invention. The first example that Shri Krishna provided was that of King Janaka, an apt example since he was a warrior just like Arjuna. Many of us familiar with the Ramayana epic would recognize the name Janaka as the father of Sita and the king of the Videha kingdom. But the word Janaka here is a post or a title. It refers to any king that was appointed to the throne because of his non-attachment to all material objects, even to his body. This is apparent in the word meaning of Videha, which is one who has given up identification with his body. Why would a kingdom appoint a king that has given up attachments? It is because someone without any attachment would make the most fair, rational and unbiased decisions in favor of the kingdom. He would not come under the sway of emotion or prejudice of any kind. Such kings were known to be excellent administrators. In addition, they were also perfect karmayogis, i.e. they were sthitaprajna or men of perfect wisdom. With this example, Shri Krishna also assured Arjuna that it was perfectly possible to attain the ultimate goal of realization, yet be working in this world. Arjuna did not need to run away from the war or his responsibilities at all. Bhagavad Gita verse 21, chapter 3. Whatever an ideal person does, so do other people imitate him. Whatever standard he sets, other people follow. In the previous verse, Shri Krishna provided the example of King Janaka who, though being a warrior king, achieved self-realization through performance of karma yoga. Here Shri Krishna puts forth yet another argument to Arjuna, knowing very well that Arjuna always put others first before himself. Shri Krishna said that whosoever looked up to Arjuna as a role model would also take to this path if Arjuna followed it. Now, an extremely important but subtle point made by Shri Krishna is hidden in the phrase ideal person does. He wants us to realize that actions speak louder than words. For instance, we cannot expect our children to not drink alcohol or smoke if we preach to them, but drink and smoke ourselves. Not just children, but most people watch what we do and not what we say. Therefore, Shri Krishna urges us to practice karma yoga, and not to simply tell people that we are learning it and so on. So in addition to urging us and Arjuna to perform karma yoga, Shri Krishna also reveals an important leadership lesson. The best way to lead is to lead by example, and not by making flowery speeches or hiring motivational speakers. This point is not just echoed in the management texts of today, but also in spiritual masterpieces such as the Dasbodh by Samarth Ramdas Swami. Bhagavad Gita verse 22, chapter 3. Neither do I have the least bit of duty in the three worlds, O Partha, nor is there anything for me to gain or lose through action, yet I engage in action. As we saw earlier, Shri Krishna wanted to provide concrete examples of individuals who had attained the eternal essence, yet continued to act selflessly in the world. Having given the example of King Janaka, Shri Krishna now spoke about himself as an example of an ideal karmayogi. He had attained a state of supreme independence where he no longer needed to act, yet he continued to act spontaneously and joyfully in the service of humanity. The Srimad Bhagavatam is filled with stories describing the life of Shri Krishna, where we find that he worked tirelessly from the start to the end of his life. There was no duty that he did not perform. He became a charioteer upon Arjuna's request. After the Mahabharata war, Arjuna's brother Yudhishthira performed a yajna. There, Shri Krishna even washed the feet of guests who attended. While performing any action, his attitude was that of equanimity, and he found great joy in the work while not expecting any reward. Shri Krishna's attitude towards life was like that of a perfect actor in a play. In fact, his stories are also known as Leelas or divine plays. An actor in a play will perform any role big or small without the slightest attachment to it and move to the next role effortlessly. Whether it was a mischievous boy who stole butter from people's homes, or the ruler of Dwarka city, Shri Krishna played his part perfectly with the attitude of a karmayogi. Bhagavad Gita verse 23, chapter 3. For, if I were not to perform my duties alertly, people from everywhere will follow my path, O Partha. To better understand this shloka, and make it more relatable, let us examine the life of an individual from our time who dedicated his life to the service of others. Baba Amtu. In his early years, he acted as a defense lawyer for freedom fighters imprisoned by British authorities in the 1942 Quit India movement. Later, Amtu founded 3 ashrams for treatment and rehabilitation of leprosy patients, disabled people, and people from marginalized sections of the society in India. Today, the largest ashram named Anandavan has a university, an orphanage, and schools for the blind and the deaf, housing over 5,000 residents. Now, imagine if someone like Baba Amtu were to one day say, I think I am going to stop all my work and take it easy. What would be the impact on the general population? People would start saying, if even Baba Amtu does not work, why should I do so? Therefore, Shri Krishna urged Arjuna to always perform action and not give in to the tendency of the human body to become lazy. If not for Arjuna's own sake, at least for the sake of others who considered him as a role model. And similarly, he urges us also to become role models by continually performing selfless actions with complete attention and alertness. Bhagavad Gita verse 24, chapter 3. These people would be ruined if I stopped performing action. I would become the creator of confusion and destroy these beings. Shri Krishna further elaborates on the argument put forth in the last shloka. As someone who has realized the eternal essence, he does not have any obligations towards the world. But even then, he continues to act towards the welfare of society. Here, he says that if he stopped acting, all people who look up to him would be ruined and destroyed. We saw the example of a great social activist like Baba Amtu, who although having performed such selfless service, continued to act till his last day. Society would take a huge hit if someone like him abruptly stopped working. In addition, there is a subtler meaning here. Shri Krishna's statements have a cosmic significance. So therefore, the word I also refers to every law or principle that works every second of our lives and never ever takes a vacation. For instance, we all know what happens to a society when there is a breakdown of law and order. There will be chaos, confusion and destruction all around. But civil and criminal laws are just man-made laws. Consider what would happen if the law of gravity, a universal law, stopped working. People, buildings, and every freestanding object on this earth would start flying out into space to its eventual destruction. And finally, what if our breathing or pumping of the heart stopped working? Therefore, the message to Arjuna is clear. Any task, no matter how insignificant or unpleasant, should be performed selflessly and with dexterity if it is in the service of the higher good. Bhagavad Gita verse 25, chapter 3. Just as an ignorant individual performs action with attachment, O Bharata, so does a wise person perform action without attachment, wishing for the welfare of society. Here, Shri Krishna offers a guideline for Arjuna in regards to working with other people. He says that one who is working with the attitude of karmayoga should learn to work in harmony with others who may have not yet understood or learned that technique. In other words, Shri Krishna warns us from adopting a holier-than-thou attitude with others when performing action. For instance, imagine a little girl playing by herself and pretending to make tea in a small cup. She brings an empty cup to her aunt and asks her to drink that tea. The aunt should enjoy that fake tea, not start questioning the reality of that tea. There is no need to do so. The child is doing what is appropriate. Similarly, just because one is studying karmayoga does not make him or her eligible to behave differently with others. Now, most of our actions are either performed individually or in a team. If we are performing actions individually, it is very straightforward to adopt the attitude of karmayoga. If we are working in a team, we could be playing the role of peers, leaders or followers. In all three of these situations, Shri Krishna urges us to maintain the attitude of karmayoga regardless of whether our peers, leaders or followers have the very same attitude. Their attitude in no way should impact the efficiency of our work. This live and let live approach is extremely practical and sensible. But is there a reason behind it? Shri Krishna will explain in the next verse. Bhagavad Gita verse 26, chapter 3. No wise individual should create confusion in the minds of ignorant people who are attached to action. He should engage them in all actions, himself performing them diligently. In the previous shloka, Shri Krishna asked Arjuna to follow a live and let live approach towards other people in this world who have not yet realized the extent of their attachments. In this shloka, Shri Krishna provides the reason behind that statement. We shall first look at an example in this regard. Consider a car going at a fast speed on a major highway. Other cars on the highway are going equally as fast. The car contains a driver and one passenger who have divided the responsibilities equally. The driver is in charge of driving, and the passenger is in charge of navigation and directions. The passenger keeps the driver informed of where to turn, how much time is left before the next food break and so on. Now in the middle of the journey, the passenger realizes that they are on the wrong highway. What is the best course of action for the passenger? If he says to the driver stop, we have to turn back, it could unsettle the driver and potentially cause a major accident on the highway. Instead, he chooses to gently inform the driver to take the next exit, stop for a few minutes in a safe area, and then figure out how to get back on the proper highway. Similarly, when working with other people, the practitioner of karmayoga should continue to perform actions diligently instead of preaching to others about karmayoga. In other words, change their way of doing action. There will always be a tendency to misinterpret the message of karmayoga if we begin preaching it to others. As evidence, note that even Arjuna had incorrectly assumed that one should give up actions altogether. Therefore, This shloka advises us to act diligently and let others act to the best of their ability and not to unsettle them in any way. Bhagavad Gita verse 27, chapter 3. All actions, in all situations, are performed by the gunas of Prakriti. He who is completely deluded by the ego thinks I am the doer. We saw earlier that an ignorant person is attached to action while a wise person is not. But what exactly does it mean to be attached to action? Shri Krishna clarifies that point in this shloka, which is yet another deep shloka with layers and layers of meaning. We shall approach it step by step to grasp its essentials. First, let us take the example of someone who has accomplished a great thing, for example, won a Grammy Award for outstanding singing. If that singer truly examines her accomplishment, she will realize that there were so many people and situations that were responsible for her accomplishment. To begin with, her parents probably encouraged her to pursue music seriously. Her music teacher taught her the theoretical aspects of music. She met other musicians who helped hone her craft. She came across a situation that inspired her to write her award-winning song. Her accomplishment was a product of all these factors. Compare that singer to some other award-winning singer who thinks that it was he who did it all and does not even acknowledge the contribution of others. The notion that I am the doer is called ahamkara or the ego and creates an asvarsisdam attitude. Someone who is under the influence of the ego is called deluded in this shloka. Let us now look at what is meant by gunas and prakriti so that we can better understand the shloka. Just like our scientists have discovered that all of matter is made up of fundamental particles known as atoms, ancient rishis postulated that all matter or prakriti is made up of combinations of three essential forces, an inert force, an active force, and a harmonizing force. These three forces or gunas are known as tamoguna, rajoguna and sattavguna respectively. Now here comes a statement which is a little difficult to swallow. Like the singer whose accomplishments had very little to do with her own efforts, every action that we perform is in reality performed by Prakriti that is comprised of the gunas. So then who are we? We go back to the second chapter to remember that we are the eternal essence that is everlasting and all-pervading. Like the sun that enlivens the earth but does not itself do anything, the eternal essence does not perform any action. It only enlivens Prakriti which is performing the action. Most of us that do not realize this truth, unfortunately, fall in the ignorant category. The next shloka shows us the goal, how to become wiser. Bhagavad Gita verse 28, chapter 3. But he who knows the truth, O mighty aunt, about the divisions of gunas as well as their functions, recognizes the interplay of gunas everywhere. Having known this, he does not get attached. Previously, we learned about the ignorant individual who is deluded by the notion that he is the doer. But then, what does the wise person know that the ignorant one does not? Shri Krishna explains that point here. The wise person is termed a tattvavit, one who knows the truth by Shri Krishna. The truth, as we saw earlier, is that all actions in this world are performed by Prakriti. And Prakriti is comprised of the three gunas and their respective functions, termed in this shloka as gunakarma vibhaga. But how exactly do we know that Prakriti causes the actions, not the I? Our sense organs are like agents that send messages to the mind when they perceive an object. For instance, if you hold a rose in your hand, the eyes, skin and nose send different signals to the mind. The mind creates a holistic picture from all those signals. This is a red rose and sends it to the intellect. The intellect analyzes that information and makes a decision by this rose, having consulted its memory of past experiences with roses. This means that perception, thinking, decision-making, all these functions are part of Prakriti, operating based on laws set by Prakriti. The I is the eternal essence, different from Prakriti. So therefore, if one knows that he is not the doer, and that things are happening of their own accord, he does not get attached to anything in this world. He becomes a witness or a sakshi, just like someone watching a play does not get attached to one actor or another. Another example is the process of digestion. We are not attached to it because we know that we are not the doer in that instance. The notion that everything is an interplay of gunas may seem abstract and theoretical. One can only gain a first-hand experience of this truth in deep stages of meditation. This teaching is beneficial in our day-to-day lives as well. If we contemplate on this teaching, it has the effect of thinning our ego. Once that happens, it makes us very humble and reduces several negative emotions like fear, anger, stress and so on. Now, we may fear that this teaching makes us lackadaisical. On the contrary, it makes thinking clear and actions more efficient by getting rid of negative emotions that drain our mental energy. Bhagavad Gita verse 29, chapter 3. People deluded by the gunas of Prakriti are attached to gunas and action. The wise person does not disturb those fools who are of limited knowledge. Shri Krishna uses this shloka to reiterate the difference between a wise person and an ignorant or foolish person. It is nothing but their degree of attachment to gunas, forces of nature, and their actions. He also restates that wise people should not preach karmayoga to those who are attached to gunas and their actions. Instead, they should lead by example. Why should they do so? The teacher in a school does not condemn or ridicule a student's ignorance about mathematics. He fully well knows that the student is in very early stages of his curriculum. With enough time and practice, the student will evolve into a higher level of math understanding. Similarly, a wise person does not condemn or judge anyone, knowing that everyone is at a different level of spiritual evolution. Judge not, that ye be not judged, as the Bible says in Matthew 7.1. As a point of clarification, let us re-examine the message of the last two shlokas, which was that most of us mistakenly think that the I is the doer. We had seen that it is a tough statement to swallow, so let us look at a common question that arises when one hears this statement. I am a well-renowned surgeon. I just completed a successful triple bypass surgery. So if I did not do it, who did? There was a team of 3 agents that performed the operation: the surgeon's mind, body and intellect. The mind gathered data from the 5 senses and presented it to the intellect. The intellect, based on past experiences and knowledge, took decisions. These decisions were sent to the surgeon's body, specifically the fingers, which performed the operation. The real I, which is the eternal essence, was a witness of this entire surgery. But the principle of the ego or ahamkara created a mix-up between the real I and the 3 agents, mind, body and intellect. Reversing this fundamental mix-up is the ultimate goal of karmayoga, in fact, of any yoga. Bhagavad Gita verse 30, chapter 3. Dedicate all your actions to me, using your intellect. Without expectation or sense of minus, fight without mental distress. Shri Krishna provides the essence of the entire chapter in this shloka, one of the most important shlokas in this chapter. It can be considered karmayoga in a nutshell. In this shloka, he covers the following 3 topics. 1. What should be our attitude while performing actions? 2. What kinds of actions should we perform? 3. How do we make our actions more efficient? First, he talks about the attitude that one should maintain while performing actions. He says that before, during and after the action, one should continuously dedicate the action to a higher ideal. It can be any higher ideal like our family, employer or nation, but we should consider it pure and divine, indicated by the word me in the shloka. What is important here is never get out of tune with the higher ideal. It is like talking to a friend constantly on a hands-free telephone while performing all actions. We can use the ritual of a puja to practice this act of dedication, but the key is to do it constantly, not just during the puja. Furthermore, we will know whether the action was in service of a higher ideal or of our ego by the feeling we get once the action is complete. If we find that we have a deep sense of peace and contentment after the action was performed, it was in the service of a higher ideal. Secondly, he asks us to use our intellect to guide us so that only correct actions, those that are our duties, are performed by us. Actions that are unethical or illegal should be discarded by the intellect. He urges us to strengthen and reinforce the intellect's power of discrimination, or viveka. Finally, Shri Krishna gives us a formula to make actions extremely efficient. He explains that our mental energy and focus leaks out of our system through three sources: brooding over the past, becoming anxious about the future, and becoming overly excited in the present. How does this leakage happen? Asha or harboring expectations is akin to living in the future because it gives rise to anxiety. It is as if we are insulting the present moment. Samatva or minus implies that we are giving undue importance to our past achievements. In other words, we are living in the past. No matter what happened in the past usually gives rise to sorrow if we brood over it. And jwara or extreme excitement and agitation in the present has the effect of destabilizing our mind and intellect. All of these three tendencies ultimately take attention away from the present moment, strengthen our ego and diminish our efficiency. So therefore, a true karmayogi always lives in the present moment and gives complete and undivided attention to the task at hand, no matter what kind of task it is. Shri Krishna urges us to give up expectation for the future, nirasha, anxiety over the past, nirmamaya, and overexcitement in the present, viktajvare. Bhagavad Gita verse 31, chapter 3. Those who always execute this teaching of mine, with faith and without objection, they too are freed from all actions. As we have seen so far, if we are bound to actions and objects, we will never be able to realize the eternal essence, which is the ultimate goal prescribed by the Gita. So in this shloka, Shri Krishna begins to conclude the teaching of karmayoga by reassuring us that it will free us from all bondages while we are engaged in action. Prior to the Gita coming into existence, people heralded a misconception that spiritual realization was the domain of a select section of society and could be achieved only through the accomplishment of extremely secret and arcane rituals. The Gita proposed a radical new method of realization where anyone regardless of their background can get the same result while performing any and all actions. So therefore, Shri Krishna urges us to overcome any misconceptions, barriers and objections we may harbor against this teaching. Some may say, this teaching is too simplistic. Others may say, it goes against whatever preconceived notions they have about religion. Or that it is not achievable and so on. Whatever be the objection, Shri Krishna wants us to put the teaching into practice and try it out for ourselves. Now, as he is about to conclude the teaching of karmayoga, Shri Krishna anticipates a problem. He knows that even for people who are ready and willing to take this path will run into obstacles. He covers this topic in the next shloka. Bhagavad Gita verse 32, chapter 3. But those who object to this teaching and do not follow it, they are confused in all of their knowledge. Know those people who are devoid of discrimination to be ruined. Shri Krishna urged us to resolve all our objections to the teaching so that we may be able to incorporate it into our lives. But even if we overcome our philosophical objections, most of us will still find it difficult to follow the practice of karmayoga. Shri Krishna therefore begins to explain what prevents us from adopting karmayoga and consequently, how should we tackle those obstacles. The primary obstacle to karmayoga are our vaasanaas. Once a person is under the influence of vaasanaas, their actions will be prompted by selfish motives. These motives are expressed as negative emotions such as jealousy, I will do things to make others jealous, or out of anger, I will destroy this person, or greed, I will earn so much even if it means I compromise on ethics. Some people even pass on negative motives to their children, e.g. I was not able to destroy this family, so you go ahead and do it, my son. Now, when we dwell in negative emotions such as jealousy, anger, greed etc., our intellect knows that what we are doing is wrong. But since our vaasanaas have overpowered the intellect, it does not function and so we follow a wrong path. We are then ruined because we are going against the laws of nature. What would happen if we disregarded the law of gravity? We would perish. A similar fate exists if we do not pursue karmayoga. So the question is, how exactly do vaasanaas cause us not follow karmayoga? Shri Krishna covers this topic next. Bhagavad Gita verse 33, chapter 3. Even a wise person will behave according to his own nature. All beings follow their own nature. What can restraint do? Shri Krishna here addresses a critical point, which is that even the most well-read and educated person will find it difficult to practice karmayoga. Why is this so? It is because inbuilt tendencies and urges inside us compel us to act against our will. These tendencies comprise our lower nature. Note that the lower nature is also called Prakriti here, which is different than the Prakriti that we saw earlier. All beings, plants, animals and humans are born with an innate set of traits. In humans, these traits are manifested in the body, mind and intellect. These traits are a product of our vaasanaas, which are impressions created by past actions. It does not matter whether one is wise or foolish, rich or poor, etc. All human beings are born with vaasanaas. These vaasanaas are thought generators. They cause thoughts about the material world to arise in our mind. And once a thought arises, it results into desire and action as we saw in the second chapter. Therefore, Shri Krishna says that mere restraint of actions will not result in eradication of desires, since the vaasanaas will continue to generate more and more thoughts. And direct suppression of thoughts is next to impossible. Many people try to repress thoughts and desires in the hope of progressing spiritually, but like a spring that is pushed down, that strategy backfires very easily. But then, should we give up our efforts altogether? That is not the case. For example, you cannot teach tiger to be non-violent and eat grass. But you can change his behavior to a certain extent through repeated training. Similarly, the vaasanaas can be channeled in the service of society. Like judo uses the opponent's strength to subdue the opponent, karmayoga uses the energy of vaasanaas to extinguish themselves. So therefore, Shri Krishna gives us a way out. Even though all of us have tendencies that can drag us lower, we can analyze those tendencies and overcome them through the technique of karmayoga. Having explained this, Shri Krishna gives us the exact location of our enemies, these lower tendencies, in the next shloka. Bhagavad Gita verse 34, chapter 3. Likes and dislikes for sense objects reside in the senses. One should not come under their sway, for they are highway robbers. Having explained that our inherent tendencies are the biggest obstacle in karmayoga, Shri Krishna points out their precise location. He says that the tendencies manifest as likes and dislikes for material objects. These tendencies reside in our senses, the eyes, ears, skin, tongue and nose. First, let us look at likes and dislikes. The only way we can truly understand the shape of our inherent tendencies is through a deep examination of our likes and dislikes. Every human being harbors likes and dislikes. It is so strange that two children having grown up in the exact same home and family environment reveal such different likes and dislikes, even as toddlers. So where are the likes and dislikes stored? They reside in our sense organs. The tongue is attracted to the taste of fries and is repelled by the taste of spinach. The eye likes a certain kind of form and is repelled by another, and so on. In his commentary on the Gita, Sant Gyaneshwar compares the sense organs to dangerous animals and asks, does one befriend a snake or maintain the company of tigers? So therefore, what is the solution? We should not come under the sway of likes and dislikes by being aware of them, especially when they strike, by using our intellect to guide us, and by continually reminding ourselves of the higher ideal we have set for ourselves in karmayoga. We should not let them create a roadblock in our path. Like an elephant that moves on its path even though dogs bark at it, we should keep likes and dislikes at bay and never lose sight of our path and goal. The first chapter of the Gita provides the best example for this shloka. Arjuna loved warfare, but he did not like the Mahabharata war simply because his relatives were on the other side. Shri Krishna, representing the intellect, guided him towards the right path. Another example is when a doctor prescribes us bitter medicine we may not like, but we take it nevertheless. Shri Krishna compares likes and dislikes to highway robbers who target travelers that are unprepared and not alert. The robbers will come out of nowhere and distract travelers from their path. Similarly, the likes make us run towards them and dislikes make us run away, but ultimately both take us away from our path. By being constantly alert that likes and dislikes can arise, we can reduce their influence. Bhagavad Gita verse 35, chapter 3. Following one's own nature, though imperfect, is still better than following another's nature that is perfect. Even dying in one's nature is better, and the nature of another leads to danger. On the surface, this shloka seems to contradict the previous shloka where Shri Krishna advocated that we should not let our likes and dislikes, i.e. our nature, take us away from our goal. Here, he seems to say that we should follow our nature instead. Let us try to analyze this paradox. Earlier, we came across the notion of swadharma, which is work that one enjoys doing, has the aptitude and training for doing, and is not illegal or unethical. Swadharma is nothing but our strongest likes and desires, and only we can judge what they are. Upon self-examination, we may find that we gravitate towards a career in art, or music, or science and so on. Let us say we determine that science is our strongest like. That now becomes our swadharma. We use the enormous pressure of our interest in science in the service of a higher goal, by becoming a researcher, for instance. Another implication of this message is that the force generated by our swadharma should be used in evolution of our personality. A person with a strong desire to fight can become a soldier if he uses his swadharma in the service of his country. But he can also become a gangster if his swadharma is not dedicated to a higher ideal. Therefore, what this shloka says is that once we have selected a strong desire as our swadharma, we should not let weaker likes or dislikes distract us from the swadharma. For example, let us say we are pursuing a PhD in science. We may come across someone following a different profession and who earns significantly more money. We should not cause our liking for more money to change our path. Not only will it help us reach our spiritual goal, we will have peace of mind too. What is unique about this approach is that it emphasizes introspection over blind faith. The beauty of the Gita's teaching is that takes care of every person. There is no fixed rigid path, each one arrives at their own path through self-analysis. It is like a kitchen where each spice is unique, but has a distinct role to play in making a meal. Bhagavad Gita verse 36, chapter 3. Then, what compels people to commit sin against their wishes, O vaasanaas, as if commanded forcefully? In the last shloka, Shri Krishna completed his teaching of karmayoga. But Arjuna was not satisfied. He was listening attentively and wanted to know more details around the obstacles to karmayoga, how to spot them and how to get rid of them. It is a wonderful question because, as we have seen earlier, obstacles to karmayoga pop up when we least expect them. Therefore, a deeper understanding of the obstacles is needed to fully overcome them. Note that Arjuna addresses Shri Krishna as vaasanaas, which means a member of the Vrishni dynasty. Even in simple matters like our food intake, we face obstacles. Most of us are smart enough to know that foods containing a lot of oil and sugar are not good for us. But when we see our favorite dessert in front of us, we are propelled to eat it. All our intellect stops functioning. Well-educated people, under the influence of greed, commit all kinds of scams today. There is an interesting statement made by Duryodhana in the Mahabharata. He says that even he knows that his actions are wrong, but there is something inside him that forces him to carry out those actions. This means that even a strong intellect is not necessarily able to check our behavior. In the final portion of the third chapter, Shri Krishna responds to Arjuna's doubt to describe the obstacles in detail and the method to control their influence on us. Bhagavad Gita verse 37, chapter 3. Shri Bhagwan said, "It is desire, it is anger, born of rajas. It is a voracious eater, a great sinner. Know it to be the enemy here in this world." Earlier, Shri Krishna had mentioned that likes and dislikes are like highway robbers. They distract us from our path. But now, he uses the term enemy to refer to desire. What is the difference between a highway robber and an enemy? A highway robber does not care who we are, he just wants to distract us, rob us and let us go. But an enemy knows us, knows our weaknesses well, and intends to cause us great harm. Therefore, desire and anger are much more dangerous than likes and dislikes. When we give a lot of attention to our likes and dislikes, it increases the proportion of the active quality, or rajas, in our system. When this happens, our likes and dislikes grow in size like weeds and become strong desires. We then go into a vicious cycle. Strong desires create more rajas, which in turn makes the desires even stronger. Similarly, if dislikes grow, they turn into anger and hatred. Now, when a strong desire gets fulfilled, there is a temporary pause in that desire and the mind becomes still for a short amount of time. As we have seen earlier, an absence of desires clears the mind and lets the eternal essence shine through. When that happens, we experience peace and happiness. But most of us wrongfully attribute that temporary spark of happiness to the object we just acquired rather than to the absence of desire. So then, we go through life fueling our desires in the hope that we can recreate that experience. The tendency to recreate happiness through repetitive acquisition of an object is called greed. Moreover, the ego becomes strong through the increase in rajas, and it begins to go outward, comparing us with others. If someone has less than us, pride is created. Conversely, if someone has more than us, jealousy is created. The practical lesson here is that we should not encourage our likes and dislikes. In other words, if a like or dislike arises in the mind, we should not give it too much attention. If we do, it will get stronger. It is easier to control a like or a dislike. Once it has grown into a strong desire or hatred, then it becomes much difficult to control. Bhagavad Gita verse 38, chapter 3. Just as smoke covers fire, dirt covers a mirror, and a womb covers a fetus, so does this desire cover that wisdom. Earlier Shri Krishna explained that when likes and dislikes morph into desire and hatred, they increase the rajas in our system, creating a vicious cycle. So what is the end result? Here, he says that when desire and hatred arise, they shut off or conceal our wisdom. Our wisdom, or ability to discriminate, resides in our intellect. Due to a lifetime's worth of conditioning, this wisdom does not become our second nature. Wisdom is like a shining light, which can easily be covered if we are not careful. So desire or anger arise from the deeper, subconscious aspects of our mind and cover this light of wisdom. We then lose any ability to decide right from wrong and behave foolishly. Shri Krishna says here that our wisdom can be covered in three ways. The thickest, most dense covering occurs due to tamasic desires. These are desires that have lived inside our system for ages, and once they get activated, they totally cover the wisdom just like a womb covers a fetus. And just like there is no other way to see the fetus other than to wait for its birth, the only way to get rid of tamasic desires is to wait. They are so strong and so in tune with our likes and dislikes that nothing can be done once they are activated. Examples of tamasic desires are excessive drinking, drug usage, or even the overpowering desire to be right, which can lead you into violent fights and arguments. Less potent than tamasic desires are rajasic desires. As Shri Krishna says in this shloka, their veiling of wisdom is less thicker than tamasic desires. They are like dust on a mirror, where one stroke of the hand cleans the mirror. Rajasic desires are usually motivated by greed. Examples include buying the latest gadget, boasting of one's accomplishments to one's friends, and so on. Finally, sattvic desires are those that cover our wisdom very lightly. The desire to attend a satsang or to attain moksha is a sattvic desire. Our wisdom shines the brightest, or in other words, operates at the greatest capacity through sattvic desires. As we progress in our journey, let us try to be alert and at least try to track the desires that we harbor. How many desires are we living with? What is the proportion between sattvic, rajasic and tamasic? Are we slowly changing the proportion in favor of sattvic desires? In this shloka, the mysterious phrase discovers that was used. Although we got a sense of what that means here, Shri Krishna goes into more detail in the next shloka. Bhagavad Gita verse 39, chapter 3. This wisdom of even intelligent people is covered by that eternal enemy in the form of desire, which is like an insatiable fire. In this shloka, Shri Krishna gives the meaning of the terms this and that were used in the previous shloka. He says that desire is the that by which this wisdom is covered. If wisdom is covered, then Prakriti takes control of us, and we fall into the depths of unintelligent behavior. Shri Krishna uses two metaphors to describe desire. First, he calls desire an eternal enemy. We may think that we have subdued desire, but its seed lies waiting in the form of likes and dislikes. When we least expect it, it will arise and turn into a strong desire within milliseconds. Hence, by calling it an eternal enemy, Shri Krishna urges us to be eternally alert and vigilant in regards to our desires. The other metaphor used for desire is that of a fire. Fire never says no to any fuel that is added to it. It is capable of surviving indefinitely as long as fuel is provided. But conversely, it ends the minute it runs out of fuel. Therefore, Shri Krishna urges us to take our focus away from thoughts of like and dislike as soon as we are aware of them. It is the power behind thought that fuels likes and dislikes to stronger. So therefore, having convinced Arjuna that desire and anger lie him and not within someone else, he proceeds to reveal their location to Arjuna in the next shloka. He purposely uses the language of war so that Arjuna will respond with rapt attention. Bhagavad Gita verse 40, chapter 3. The senses, mind and intellect are said to be its residence. Through them, this, desire, covers the body dweller as wisdom. Like a military strategist reveals the location of the enemy to the warrior, Shri Krishna in this shloka reveals the location of the karmayogi's enemy. The enemy in the form of desire has three residences. The first residence is the senses, the second is the mind, and the third is the intellect. Note that he uses the term body dweller to remind us that the body, mind and intellect are separate than the eternal essence. In the senses, desire and anger manifest as likes and dislikes, as we have seen before. Now, each sense organ has its own likes and dislikes. For example, the ear may find some sounds pleasing and others harsh. These likes and dislikes come from our natural tendencies or prakriti. You can see likes and dislikes in animals as well. Your pet dog may prefer one kind of food over another. There is not much that we can do about our natural tendencies. We just need to ensure that they do not obstruct us from our goals. But when we feed them by giving them time and attention, they get charged by our emotions and take residence in our mind. Our mind is the faculty that gathers data from the senses and creates a coherent picture of what is being senses. It also generates thoughts based on current and past impressions. Our language will give us an indication of whether a like is residing in our senses or in our mind. If we say, I like to eat fries or I prefer fries, it is still at the level of senses. But if we say, I absolutely love fries, I cannot do without them, it means that the like has now gone into the mind. There is another indication that a desire has penetrated into the mind. A desire can be active even if the object of the desire is not perceived by the senses. If we dislike a person only when we meet him, then that dislike is at the level of the senses. But if we keep thinking I hate that person even when he is not in front of us, then that dislike has become hatred and has penetrated our mind. The last and most dangerous place for a desire to reside is in our intellect, which is the faculty that takes decisions based on analysis and rationality. If we begin to justify and rationalize our loves and hates, it means that the desire has penetrated into our intellect. It is extremely difficult to tackle such desires because they have completely taken hold of us, our senses, our mind and our intellect. Someone who resorts to violence and is utterly convinced of his position will even quote from scriptures to justify his actions, for instance. So therefore, Shri Krishna provided Arjuna with the location and nature of the enemy that he needed to tackle. He explains the technique of tackling the enemy in the next shloka. Bhagavad Gita verse 41, chapter 3. Therefore, first control the senses, O excellent among bhartas, and with force, definitely kill this destroyer of knowledge and wisdom. Having revealed the location of desire, Shri Krishna now provides a method of taming desire. He advises Arjuna to first control desire at the level of the senses. Desires originate in the likes and dislikes present in the senses, and therefore, that is where we should go after them. This requires us to be constantly aware and alert of our likes and dislikes, and not to get overpowered by them once we see them arise. For example, we can detect anger towards someone we dislike arise in our mind. We may try to suppress angry thoughts, but that is not feasible. Therefore, we should first learn to control anger at level of the tongue by not speaking any harsh words towards that person. How do we remain alert? There are several techniques to make us alert and bring us to the present moment. The simplest technique is to take a few breaths and just focus attention on the inhaling and exhaling. This will immediately stop all mental chatter. Shri Krishna also mentions here that desire not only destroys knowledge but also wisdom. So let us correctly understand what is meant by wisdom here. Essentially, knowledge plus experience is equal to wisdom. If we read something in a book, then it is knowledge. But if we experience something on our own, then we own it and it becomes wisdom. With this shloka, Shri Krishna answered the question raised by Arjuna, which was in regards to obstacles to karmayoga. He also provided a simple technique that only begins to address the obstacles, but does not completely eradicate them. In the next two verses, he concludes the topic of karmayoga by providing the advanced technique of removing these obstacles.